At 23, almost 24 years old, which was not that long ago by the way, I smoked weed for the first time and was stopped by police. Now, for most people, at least in America, 23 years old is considered a very old age for puffing on that reefer for the first time. I know that kids these days are ripping yards in their school bathroom, and while I'm not condoning that kind of behavior since your brain is still developing, I was also in high school at one point, so I still remember what that was like, albeit there was more kids ripping vapes back then. And so before we get into my first time with the devil's lettuce, this is episode 5 of my storytime videos, so please feel free to check out any other episodes you have missed playlist on my channel. With that being said, I should probably give some context for why it took me so long to puff on that gas station gas. Since the 7th grade, so around 12 years old, I have been a long distance runner and did cross country and track until I graduated high school. Yes, I was a long distance runner before it became a trend. Now, if you've raced 3 miles before or have done some sort of like competitive long distance running in general, you know that by the end of that race, you feel like your heart and lungs are about to explode. And if you don't, then you aren't running hard enough. And so growing up, when it came to the idea of smoking anything, cigarettes, weed, vapes, galaxy gas, I turned them all down because I already felt like I was about to die while running with a pair of fresh pink lungs, never mind trying to do long distance races after smoking. I also didn't care if my friends smoked or not. In fact, I kind of just kicked it with everyone from kids popping Zans before schools, kids on the science olympiad and math team to other athletes. Back then and now, I don't care if you're underweight, overweight, emo, alt, nerd, jock, tall, short, white, black, purple, have 3 eyes or whatever the fuck. If you were chill with me, then I was chill with you, and we had no problem chopping it up unless you were diddling kids or something. That being said, I know there are people out there who will look at you like you just whipped out a crack pipe if you sparked up a J next to them. Back then, if you packed a fat bowl next to me, I'll just move away a little so that my parents didn't freak out if they smelled some of that Zaza on me, as they were and still are against the consumption of the reefer due to the opium wars. I'm not joking by the way, and I don't blame them. I just try my best not to give them a reason to get upset and reignite our ancestral memories of the opium wars. When I graduated high school, I enlisted in the Marines, and well, check out my Marine Corps Chronicles playlist for those stories. And no, I wasn't hitting 360 no-scopes out of helicopters. I had a very average enlistment. In fact, I never went overseas, albeit not to sell myself too short. I still had some funny ass moments and memories and made friends I wouldn't trade for anything, alongside an honorable discharge, so I can't complain. But what that also meant is that I obviously could not smoke weed while I was in. As a student at the University of Southern California, fight on for any Trojans watching this, I met a group of friends that smoked pretty often, alongside the fact that I was in California, and well, I don't think I have to explain why I often ran into people enjoying a J or blunt while walking down the street. Weed had always intrigued me. You hear about it in music and other media, not to mention, at least for some of my childhood, smoking weed was this taboo that made the forbidden flower more mysterious and, I guess you can say, interesting. However, for the longest time, I never really felt like I was missing out on anything for the reasons I mentioned, and even when everyone else was smoking around me, I didn't feel too bad because I was sipping on a drink and also getting lit. It's like when people ask me what it's like growing up as an identical twin. I can tell you my experience, but I can't tell you what it's like compared to not growing up with an identical twin because, well, I've always been an identical twin, if that makes sense. But I'm not gonna lie, the curiosity started to build over the years, and plus I've seen people smoke many times before and they seemed just fine afterwards and hella chill and didn't get any of that reefer madness. And so one day I figured, fuck it, I wanted to puff on that CIA pack. It just so happens that a bunch of friends from USC were going to kick it at an apartment of one of our friends, and we decided that that's where I was going to lose my weed virginity. And so this is when the story begins. On this fateful September day, the location we were meeting at was on West Adams Boulevard in Los Angeles near a restaurant. I'm not doxing my friend's address by the way since he's moved since then, but this is important for the story. On that day, there was some kind of festival going on. I have no idea exactly what it was, but there was a concert with a bunch of food vendors, and essentially the entire street was closed off for this event. Anyways, we grabbed some food while it was still daytime since we were going to be smoking in the evening, alongside the fact that we were still waiting for a few other people to show up. Evening comes around and we all gather up on the balcony of my friend's apartment. Now, I don't know what kind of ganja my friends rolled up for the first time. All I know was that they were gonna bring some of that real California gas. And keep in mind, not everyone watching this has smoked before, and so what you gotta understand about the devil's lettuce is that not all weed is the same. You California people are lucky bastards because they are not joking about that California reefer. California has that wicked weed that makes you start drooling on the couch and locked up like you're wearing a straitjacket in an insane asylum. Here in Illinois, an ounce of that mid-tier weed is around $150 and at times closer to $200 from a dispensary, at least at the places I've been to. And we're talking about small shit that crackles while you're smoking like Pop Rocks or just some fungal packed brick weed. So any consumers of the Mary Jane in California, just know how blessed you are. We formed this little circle on the balcony and we're just chopping up, right? And they get to lighting the joint. And I would describe it, but it looks like the most generic joint ever, so I'm not sure what to describe. And when it comes to my turn to hit it, my friends tell me how to do it properly. You first purse your lips so that when smoking and passing it around, you don't get the J wet and sogging with your saliva. When hitting it, you first suck the smoke into your mouth and then do a second inhale to get the smoke into your lungs, sort of like a I sound like a Minecraft spider. And if you're in a circle, so like smoking with a group of friends or something, a good etiquette is puff, puff, pass, so that you aren't letting any of the weed go to waste by just holding it and letting it burn, and so that the J doesn't go out. Not to mention that everyone isn't just raging at you because you're just holding the weed and not passing it. When passing, you should also ash the joint before you pass it, although some people do like to smoke and see how like long they can get the white ash before it falls off. But anyways, that's what I was told. I'm also told that many people, when they smoke for the first time, don't actually get high or that high because they inhale it wrong. So when I get the joint to my lips, I make sure to suck that shit as deep as I can and hold it in my lungs, and then I cough my brains out. By the way, don't hold smoke in your lungs as it doesn't make you any higher since the THC gets absorbed almost instantly and makes no difference if you hold it in other than just fucking up your lungs. The smoke almost feels like it's tickling my throat and lungs, followed by a harsher burning sensation, and I cough probably for a minute straight after hitting the J for the first time. Also keep in mind that this was really my first time actually smoking anything, and so my lungs were not used to it. I go back and hit it again, and this time just blowing it out immediately, and while I don't go into a coughing fit, that smoke really did tickle my lungs and burn. It was certainly an interesting feeling. And so as I pass on the J, I look over the balcony and pay close attention from getting sober to high, and after about 10 seconds or so of the second hit, I started feeling it. Because many people smoke weed for the first time in high school or earlier with a group of friends in the backyard or woods, at least in America, although obviously your experience can differ, usually in that period of time, they're not paying close attention to the details of things because they're still kids. Because I was 23 years old, pushing 24 at the time, I wanted to actually document what I felt like when smoking weed for the first time. And I wrote it down on a piece of paper that my friends took a picture of, by the way, and I promise my handwriting isn't usually this bad. I was just faded as hell and could barely write. Even if you had smoked the forbidden foliage before, my friends told me afterwards that they found what I wrote and said to be pretty interesting because since they smoked so much more, they didn't really pay attention to the small details of getting high like someone would if they were smoking for the very first time. And so this is the exact order of what it feels like to smoke weed for the first time. Let me explain. Phase 1. Burned lungs. Okay, like I was saying before, right? I had a coughing fit, and if you have a pair of like fresh, untainted pink lungs, you're most likely also going to have a coughing fit if it's your first time blowing tree. About 10 seconds after smoking, phase 2 begins. Sharpened vision. No, I didn't gain hawk vision or some kind of superpower. What I mean is that everything got a clarity filter. Like if you were to go to Photoshop and use the clarity dehaze slider over your vision. This was then paired with being highly focused on something you're looking at. So if there was a lamp in the background that you didn't pay attention to before the entire night, when high, you're more likely to stare at the lamp like moths to a flame. That's what I mean by clarity in your vision. After close to a full minute of taking the last puff, Phase 3 begins. Sluggish. My body started slowing down. My reaction time became slower. And while it's not the same way as alcohol where it feels like you have a distinct separation between your mind and body, when it came to weed, it just made my responses and physical reaction time slower. This is why if you're talking to someone after they're faded off of that 3-pronged plant, they'll be staring into the distance, probably thinking about some random shit, and you've got to try a little extra harder than usual to make them snap back into reality and, well, look at you. Phase 4 begins right about or maybe a little bit after phase 3. And this is when you start to feel like you're floating, you're chilling, and your mouth starts to get a little dry. At this point, everyone was still chopping it up, and I went for my second round of puff puff pass, but I can tell that everyone was starting to feel it. I specifically noticed how when it came to weed, not everybody's eyes get red like in the cartoons. However, an easier way to tell if someone is high is that usually people have a little grin on their face and their eyes are get a little bit scrunched up where it looks like they're in the middle of a half smile. At this point, one of the friends with us accidentally dropped the joint off the balcony and it lands in the middle of a restaurant. I'm not joking, by the way, although thankfully it didn't land in anyone's food. Phase 5 happens close to 5 minutes or so after smoking, and this is when everyone starts to get really high and starts to go non-verbal. This is why I named this phase Everyone Goes Silent. Now everyone is just vibing to the feeling of floating and your mind becomes immensely fascinated by shit you've never paid attention to before. Music in the background feels like a concert where you feel every beat and lyric and your body just gets more relaxed as you start to stare off into the distance and everything just becomes more entertaining. You see a stray cat dash across the street and you think, I wonder if that cat has a family and what it's doing. Why did it cross the street? Was it to get back home or maybe to enter a hunting spot that it likes a lot? Everyone also goes nonverbal because everyone is in their own thoughts while enjoying the effects of that THC and terpenes. Phase 6 is becoming noticeably mentally slower. This also happens at the peak of getting high, and keep in mind that these phases don't start and stop after another phase. They all eventually blend together. But phase 6 is actually a pretty interesting phase because when I get drunk, at least for the first few drinks before I started getting real stupid, I also feel uplifted, light, like the edge is taken off. And for anyone struggling with alcohol, please don't start drinking after I said that because don't forget about the morning of shame when waking up. When it comes to that gas station gas, I feel a similar uplifted floating feeling, which I know is strange because one is an upper and one is a downer. The difference is that when I'm real drunk, I become real stupid and my brain is telling me that I'm more sober than I actually think. When it came to that ganja, I was more sentient than being drunk and aware that I was high as fuck. But when I started speaking, my thoughts would wander off and the shit I say would be incoherent, but I was aware that this was not normal. If I was actually drunk and slurred a pickup line at a bar or something like that, I would walk away being like, yeah, that was pretty smooth. Even if the person I just talked to considered putting explosives underneath my car. With weed, I'd be thinking, man, I am butchering this. I have to go lie down or something. So why do I say phase 6 is becoming mentally slower? Well, weed does affect the way you think. At least for me, I constantly have thoughts racing through my head. If you watch my gaming videos, I often get mini strokes during an intense moment, not because I forgot how to speak English, but because so many thoughts are racing through my head that I have trouble getting my words out. What we did was quiet those voices for me. I was still aware that I was high and under a different state of mind, but I found it easier to slow down and ponder stuff one subject at a time. But what it also did was give me memory loss. I remember someone asked me a question and not only did it take me a moment to respond and register that the person was even talking to me, but I completely forgot the question right after the person had asked it. And this leads into phase 7, curiosity. While in the previous stages I found myself being entertained by various things I did not pay attention to before, phase 7 is when you're hit with a wave of creative thoughts and just questions. The cat that crossed the street earlier, you're not just wondering what it's doing and where it came from, you're thinking, what if there was a PvP video game like Left 4 Dead except the zombies are a gang of cats while the players are trying to survive are rats and have to like work together to make traps or something and play hide and seek. If you pull up a YouTube video or movie at this phase, you would feel like you're in the movie or video, where that reefer makes you really immersed in whatever you're watching. The same with gaming. If you ever played a game while high, man, it feels like you are in that shit. You also start paying attention, very close attention, to your body and every sensation is magnified, and that is also why people enjoy taking a shower when high. And then phase 8 hits, the munchies. This is, in my opinion, the worst part about smoking weed. Okay, hear me out. Food tastes tastes incredibly good when you're high. Every bite is like a Tide Pod pouch of flavor exploding into your mouth. However, you also get this feeling where you aren't ever completely full. You could eat and eat and eat, and while it does taste really good, that feeling of being hungry is just lingering in the background still. I don't enjoy this feeling because then I eat more than I probably should, especially if you're trying to go on a cut, but then again, this can also just be a me problem. That or anyone else watching this, please recommend me some healthy snacks from Nika the Munchies. And speaking of the munchies, we decide to go to a nearby restaurant and get some apple pie after my friend Dennis, who is the friend I texted in my Sundown Out video by the way, hands me a glass of water because weed makes you real thirsty. I am so high. It is actually crazy. I took about 4 good hits of the J, and so I am in another universe. It felt like I was in third person mode while also trying to float mentally. My body also had a little bit of a tingle, but it was mainly a head high for me. Once we get some apple pie and talk some more, we head back to the apartment where we all chill on the couch and watch a nature documentary. A few hours go by and it's a Sunday night, so people are ready to head back home, and my friends offered to drive me home, but I actually lived a little bit away, not to mention the next day I would have to either get a ride or call Uber back down, then drive my car back, and so I was just like, fuck it. I'll just get into my car, watch some YouTube videos and sober up, and then when I feel sober again, I'll drive back home. And that was my first mistake. You see, remember the festival thing that was happening earlier? Well, what that also meant was that I couldn't just park in my usual spot close to the apartment. I had to not only park away from the event, but I actually parked the car even further since I didn't want people in the event fucking with my car intentionally or not. And so I ended up parking like a mile and a half away, or roughly a 30-minute walk. Furthermore, I didn't know it at the time, but I get crazy paranoid when high. It could just be because it was my first time, as it isn't as bad now, at least when I'm alone or in a familiar environment. And so as we say our goodbyes, I'm still high, although a few hours had already gone by. I start heading out the front door, and I emerge into what I can only describe as one of the worst environments to be high in for the first time. The event had ended, and in its place was a whole bunch of drunk people and strangers. And since lots of the festival lights were now turned off, there was an eerie glow along the entire street. 5 minutes or so into my walk, I start getting the creepy feeling that someone is watching me. I look around, and I mean, there's people around, but none of them seem to be looking at me specifically, so I just kind of brush it off and keep walking. At this point, due to my paranoia, my heart was beating so hard in my chest, I could physically feel every single beat. I begin to see flashes of movement in the corner of my eyes, almost like shadows trying to tap me on the shoulder, but when I turn around to look, there's nothing there. Just to be clear, weed doesn't make you see rainbows, unicorns, and shit. These weird shadows I was seeing was most likely my imagination caused by my paranoia. Maybe a little halfway into my walk, I passed by what I assumed to be 2 groups of friends arguing. Hey, that's none of my business, but they were standing in the middle of the sidewalk. When I get close to them, they start getting more heated in whatever they were arguing about until one of them is threatening the other, and they start raising their voices, and now I'm tweaking all the way out. At that moment, I thought this group was conspiring to jump me or something, despite the fact that they almost certainly weren't even paying attention to me. And so I walked to the far side of the street and continue on my way. For the last stretch of this walk, I'm envisioning a random passerby shanking me to death like in Breaking Bad until I finally get to my car. I'm sitting in the driver's seat of my Corolla, which has no tints, and so while I'm trying to watch some YouTube videos and not tweak out, people keep passing by and staring into my vehicle, or at least I perceive them to be. I start thinking that they're plotting to rob or kill me or something, so I decide to go into the back of my car and lay down. That way people will stop staring at me when they walk past my car. It couldn't have been more than 10 minutes, but as I'm laying down and looking at my phone, I see a bright beam from a flashlight enter my car, followed by 3 firm knocks on my window, and what do you know? It was a cop. I am already close to losing my mind, and seeing this cop did not help me tweak out less, but at the same time, it wasn't like I was making an IED in the back of my car. Bro couldn't arrest me for watching YouTube videos in my own car. My car is turned off, so I physically get out of the car since I can roll the windows down, and the cop is looking at me and tells me that my car is blocking half of the section of the curb with the red line where it's a no park area. To be fair, that was entirely my fault. I parked there earlier because there was so many cars also trying to find spaces to park, and there was also a bunch of people like double parked in spot, etc, etc, so I didn't think too much about it. I let the officer know that I was on my way, and he didn't even ID me. He literally just let me go once he made sure I wasn't dying. And I don't think it was because I was special or anything, because I know for a fact that I wasn't the only one parked illegally near this festival, and so he probably wasn't trying to ticket 100 people, and he was just tasked with like trying to clear the event out afterwards. Or maybe it was because of my charming smile. Anyways, I start my car, and you're not supposed to drive all high, although I will say that drunk driving and high driving are most definitely different. Not that I've done either of those before, not that you should either drive sober. But at the same time, it had been many hours since I smoked, and so I was actually sobering up, although the paranoia was still there. And in this drive back to my place, I wasn't going a mile past the speed limit. I know I was making people rage on the road because no one ever drives exactly the speed limit, but man, I was so paranoid and tweaking, whereas every single car that drove behind me, I thought it was some kind of undercover cop about to pull me over. It was one of the worst drives of my life. And finally, I made it back to my apartment in central Los Angeles. And so, what did I think of my first time smoking weed? Minus the part where I tweaked out, it was a good time. It would not be my last time smoking weed or running into a cop while high, although the next time that happened, I was in the middle of a forest preserve and had a gun on me, but that is a story for another time. And speaking of stories, please feel free to check out any other episodes you have missed from this series alongside other videos that might interest you. As on this channel, I post everything from gaming to educational content to story times. Thank you for watching and bye.